it's been quite a long journey for me. I started my first kind of, I guess, time when I became into animals or anything, thinking consciously, I guess, was when I became a diver. So I used to
Okay.
dive, and I became really interested in sharks. So I started working for the Shark Conservation Trust, and I started campaigning about people eating shark fin soup and protecting sharks, and kind of wanting everyone to know about sharks. Um, and that was all really through diving, and when I became aware about the plight of the sharks. But up until that point, I hadn't really had much experience with any kind of vegetarians or vegans. Didn't really even, never even really consciously thought about anything myself. And my sister had been a vegetarian actually when she went to university, but at the time, again, I just didn't really, she never, I don't think, I'm not 100% sure even what her reasons for going. It wasn't necessarily animal rights for her. And I remember I went to a restaurant with my husband when we first started going out, and he was a vegetarian when I met him. And we went to, it's called Dan Le Noir, and it's a restaurant where they have it completely in the dark in London. It's quite a cool experience. And I went for the, everything menu, complete surprise. And at the end of the menu, they come to you and they say, "Oh, do you want to know what you ate?" And I was like, "Yeah, tell me." And it was like zebras and crocodiles, which didn't bother me at the time. And then they said, "And shark." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I've just literally eaten what I campaign against and didn't even know." And it was such a shock to me. I actually went and spoke to the manager at the end, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like, sharks are protected, they're endangered." And he told me this story about how they'd been farmed. And I think in my head, I thought, "Oh, okay." And then I was thinking, farm sharks, is that even a thing? That seems really strange, because how could you farm a shark? Um, so that was kind of the first thing. And then obviously my husband was vegetarian. So I'd started eating more vegetarian at home anyway when we were cooking, because it just kind of made sense. And actually our wedding, we had an entirely vegetarian wedding, because I wasn't really that bothered with eating meat. I wasn't one of those people who was like, I have to have meat and veg on my plate and anything like that. So I I just kind of gradually stopped eating it, and then I'd eat it when I went out. And I can remember actually getting quite frustrated sometimes when we'd go out to restaurants with him, and he'd be like, "Oh, I can't eat anything there," and I'd be like, "Oh," you know. And then I started becoming a bit more ethically aware about issues, things like fair trade and slave labor, and I started boycotting products like Nestle, Coca-Cola, Mars. And then the more I kind of looked into products, I kind of started seeing that actually there's a lot of products here that are damaging. And I was starting to think, well, what am I going to eat? Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing I can eat anymore. So I I ended up opening a shop to sell ethical goods, and that was kind of the premise. And at the time, I'd then gone vegetarian alongside my husband. I remember watching a video. I never really liked handling raw meat
Mm.
anyway, and I didn't like eating meat off the bone. So I think maybe there was some sort of subconscious connection there. And um, I remember watching a video, because I used to love chicken nuggets, and I think it was one of those foods that I thought I would never be able to live without. And I remember watching a video about how they'd made them, and it was, I don't even know if it's true, but it just was completely disgusting. It was like this like red mush, and they were talking about how they had to bleach it because they just put all, and I was like, oh my goodness. And it was about the same time as the horse meat scandal. um
Yeah.
and I was like, I wasn't really bothered about the horse meat, because I was one of those people that sort of thought, well, any animal, I wasn't really, if it was a horse or like a crocodile, it didn't, I didn't really bother me. It was,
Yeah.
meat was meat. I wasn't particular about the types of meat I would eat. um, but I had these chicken. It just totally put me off chicken nuggets, and I think because they were kind of like the one food that was probably stopping me from going vegetarian. It was kind of like, well, I'm like 95% of the way there at home anyway, because me and my husband would always eat the vegetarian food anyway. So it was only when I was going out. So I'd kind of gone vegetarian myself. So the shop was entirely vegetarian at the time, and I kind of went on this mission to find ethical products. So I did a lot of research into all the products that I was selling, and through people coming into my shop, I started to learn that actually there's no such thing as ethical dairy. And I remember kind of having the conversation with my husband, because he's been vegetarian for like 30 years now. And I remember sort of saying to him, because he was a big, vegetarians that love their cheese. He was one of those, and I was like, we can't have this anymore. Like, I've literally, I mean, naively didn't even think about how milk got into a cow. When I found out, I was completely horrified. I mentioned it to my husband, and we had to kind of go on that journey. And it was really from my shop that pushed me to go vegan, and then I ended up turning my shop vegan. We were only really selling honey and dairy anyway in the shop, but I cut out the dairy first, and then I cut out the honey, and then we became a vegan shop, and that was quite cool. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much. So he kind of was vegetarian, and then I went vegan, and then the kids, then we turned the kids vegan as well.
What age were your kids when you kind of broke the news to them?
Yeah, well, my son was about 2, so I mean, he'd already been vegetarian from birth, and my daughter was about 4. But I didn't actually break the news to the kids. So I mean, my husband was a bit reluctant to go vegan, and I kind of just literally, like, every time he was opening the fridge door, I was like, oh, that milk, and I was kind of like putting a lot of pressure on him. With the kids, we kind of did it a bit silently at first. I think we just was like, because it wasn't a massive change because we were already eating vegetarian. We just kind of switched out the milks, and I can remember actually getting a whole load of milks out for the kids because they didn't really like the vegan milks at first. I literally bought every one, and I was like, let's do a taste test, let's decide. And in the end, I ended up making them kind of go cold turkey off milk for about a month, and then eventually they started drinking oat milk. But I kind of let them choose at first outside of, or I didn't necessarily put any. I mean, I would never have bought vegan for them, non-vegan for them. But for example, when they went to grandma's, I hadn't really sort of said to them, "Oh, you can't do that." And then my daughter at Christmas, she says she was at my in-laws, and they bought out a box of chocolates, and they said, "Oh, do you want these?" And she said, "Oh, are they vegan?" And I was like, she was only 4 at the time, and I was like, "Oh, well, hello." And after that day, I was like, "Do you want to be a vegan as well?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." And then kind of, because my son was a bit younger, he kind of just followed along anyway. But I remember he loves chips, and I remember having a conversation with him when he was quite young, and I said, if chips weren't vegan, would you still eat them? And he said no, and I was like, oh, okay. So they're properly into the vegan message themselves. And I think it is important to get kids to kind of be on your side rather than kind of saying, okay, you have to eat this and this, because there's a chance they might rebel at some point.
Yeah. Were they in any kind of formal setting at this point, nurseries or anything like that?
Yeah, well, actually, my son Leo, they're both in nursery at that point, and I kind of actually forgot to mention it to the nursery. By the time my daughter went vegan, she was just started school, so I talked to the school about it. And actually, they were, at first I was a bit worried how it was going to go down, but actually they provided a vegan menu for her, and it was mostly okay. We did have obviously some issues. My son, I hadn't really mentioned it to the nursery because I was providing his lunch, so I didn't really think. And then one day, there was a picture like Jacob holding some milk, and it says Jacob's sharing milk with his friends, and I was like, I had no idea they were giving them milk. Like, I don't know why I thought they would. I just didn't think they were giving them any food or drink at nursery, and I didn't think to even mention it. And after that point, I then had to go in and say, oh, hang on, you shouldn't be having milk. So I was a bit horrified by that.
How about things like activities that they had to do there? You know, did you ever have to kind of like almost any of those kind of conversations? You almost have to re-educate the nursery, or at least help them understand that there's a more inclusive way to do this than the way that they're currently doing it.
I think the nursery were actually quite helpful with it all. I remember they did a pancake day thing, and they decided to do a vegan one for all the kids, and they used it as an opportunity to kind of talk a bit about veganism. I think because I had the shop as well, I was kind of sort of known in the area a little bit. And I think that may have helped with that. My daughter, it was more of a problem at school, and I think it was more of a problem from things like at Easter, they gave her a packet of grapes when they gave all the other kids. And, you know, when the kids like 4 or 5, and even though they were on it and they understood, and they didn't really seem to get that upset by it, to be honest. I mean, I would be pretty upset if I got given grapes and everyone else got given chocolate, but but they she seemed to take it on. But I kind of had to teach the school a little bit more about you know, and I remember my daughter coming home one day when she was in reception class and saying, "Mummy, cows don't get hurt when they have milk." And I was like, "Where'd you hear that?" She says, "My teacher told me in milk time," you know, because she was having water when all the other kids were having milk. And again, that was her choice. We could have probably provided one, but you know, kids don't really need milk when they're 5, so water is fine.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I ask because I've got a little boy. He's 3.5, and so a bit like you, I found a few little bits and pieces with the nursery, a couple of conversations around, you know, a bit of the kind of grapes example actually a couple of times. So we've had to kind of educate on this. It sounds crazy, like educating on better junk food that we can you please make sure that he gets, you know, X, Y, Z. But other than that, they've been really receptive. But I'm really conscious of schools, because I kind of think, you know, where there isn't, call it what it is, where there isn't the fee being paid, I wonder whether there's a sort of less of a feeling of responsibility maybe, or and the scale of the operation being that much larger. I just wonder whether there's, you know, it feels like more of an inconvenience to them. And I wonder about that. That milk story is really interesting. I wonder whether it was almost like a teacher trying to quell a potential uprising. You know, somebody points out that milk's not actually that good for cows, and
I think that's the thing. I mean, my kids are quite activist-like anyway, and there's definitely been issues. And I remember once actually going to a party outside of school, obviously, and all the kids started suddenly chanting my daughter's name, "Is the worst, is the worst," you know. And I was like, I was so shocked at the time, and they were actually talking about her food because they were eating at the time, and they were saying that her food was the worst. But I was so surprised, and I'm so shocked, and I so regret not speaking up at that time, because I was kind of like looking to other parents like, are you going to like deal with your kids here? Because they're like, and I think I found that sort of thing did happen in school, obviously, because they had different food, and there's that whole issue. Like, I know one of my daughter's friends, my daughter talked her into trying veganism, and then obviously her parent talked her out of it, and it causes all sorts of conflicts. And actually both my kids are now home educated, not necessarily entirely because of the veganism thing, but it does make it a lot easier.
I can imagine. It's just really difficult, isn't it? Kids have got such a strong sense of like justice, if you like, and things being fair, and if they see an injustice, they want to call it out. So once they know these things, they're like quite comfortable saying to everybody. But sort of society's kind of designed for everybody to not call out anything, just leave it all, leave it all in the shadows. Which is, you know, it's not the right way to go about things. I wish we had the mind of everyone had the mind of, you know, our kids, but you know, unfortunately not. So it's really difficult to get them to navigate the subtleties of, like, you know, people aren't quite ready to hear that maybe in that way, and I don't even know how you begin really. Like, I'm lucky, mine's only little at the moment, so everything's quite easy. And there does seem to be how old are your kids now?
So my daughter is 9 and my son is just nearly coming up to be 7.
Okay, well, I'll ask you this question then, because I was going to say I feel like even in the last 3.5 years since Arthur's been around, that probably the other parents that we've spoken to and things like that are just more aware, like that, even if they don't understand all the nuances and the detail, there's at least, when you say vegan, oh, okay, cool, yeah, we'll provide something at the party or whatever, there's not like like what are we, you know, there's not a complete like catatonic state induced by the word vegan. Have you found that, or is that very much like dependent on the group you surround yourself with?
I mean, I do try and surround myself with vegans now, which works for my own mental health, and but obviously, I mean, my kids still have friends that are not, and I think it does depend on the parents, and obviously the longer you go down that journey, when they have friends, you know, my daughter's now, her friends, I mean, their parents are pretty well aware of my daughter's requirements and how my daughter, but there have definitely been times when it's been a real challenge, and at my daughter's party, I always used to obviously do a whole vegan spread, and obviously all the parents knew that we were the vegans in the village, the odd ones, and because I live in a bit of a country land, which is quite a farming territory as well, so it's we definitely are the odd ones out here. And there was times when, and I would always do things like pasta and things that they would eat, so it wouldn't be anything too different, so that they could, and I was kind of doing it as well to be like, we're not that odd. Do eat normal things, and like party rings, or I'd do whatever I could to make it as normal as possible. And there were times when kids would like come to the party and they'd be like, oh, I don't like anything, mummy. And you could just kind of tell they must have been preempted with that, because and I'd say to the parents, oh, you guys can help yourself, and they'd be like, oh no, thank you, like that they don't want to eat that vegan food. And there was definitely things like that. And there were parties where we went to where my daughter had to stand by the side and had literally nothing to eat. And as I got better, obviously I would always kind of make contact, but there were times when especially when they're in their first year, they kind of go to everyone's party in the year, and there were times when it was like, oh my goodness, there's nothing, and I thought there was going to be, or I thought that parent knew that she was vegan and I'd forgotten to mention it. And there was at least 2 times when it was really awkward at parties, and they are one of the tricky things to navigate. But now what I do is I just bring a box of food, or speak to the parent in advance and say, oh, by the way, we're vegan, what are you doing? I could try and make some alternatives. But it is tricky. And I think one of the things for us as adults, we've all experienced discrimination, we've all experienced, I mean, I was once out at a conference and someone said, oh, why are you having something different? I said, oh, I'm vegan. And she was like, oh, I hate vegans, and walked off. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah. So and as adults, we can sometimes find that quite challenging. And you do think, what effect is this having on our kids, and what are they feeling, and how is it affecting them? And it does play on my mind a lot, which is kind of why I started Vegan Kids, I guess.
Yeah, and a perfect segue. Let's get into that. Vegan Kids. Let's talk about it. What is it? When did you start it? Tell us a little bit about the origin story.
So I was in my shop, and I as I was kind of going down my journey, I was becoming much more ethical. I was becoming much more consciously aware, and I started to think, do you know what? Selling products is not ethical. Consumerism is the problem, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm a shopkeeper, and to keep my livelihood going, I have to encourage people to buy things. And I just had this real conflict where I was starting, and I was being pushed down avenues like the zero waste movement, which I wasn't really that into, because I was starting to become really passionate about veganism and everything about it. And I just was becoming so much less passionate, and the shop, it was incredible hard work. I was, I had 2 young kids, and it was it was full on, because I wasn't just out running the shop. I had to do all the stuff that comes with running a business as well. And I remember my son once saying to me, I said, oh, we were reading the Mr. Men books. I said, oh, what Mr. Men is mummy? I was kind of hoping he'd say, oh, Mr. Lazy or something. He was like, oh, Mr. Busy. And I was like, oh no, that's horrible. My son thinks I'm busy. So I've been going through this thing, and I was thinking, oh, what could I do? And I was like, I'm so passionate about veganism, I want to do something for that. And I don't really know where the idea came from, actually, but it kind of popped into my head. I want to do a festival for kids. I want to bring kids together, and I just want a weekend where, because this was kind of before veganism was as it is out in the open now. It was, I mean, we're only talking like 4 or 5 years ago maybe, but so much has changed in those 4 or 5 years already. And we didn't meet that many vegans. I mean, obviously I had the shop, so I did meet a few, but it just wasn't as much. And I just wanted a world where I could just go and be vegan for a weekend, where it was just, everyone around me was vegan, everyone got me, everyone understood how I felt, and we could just go and have this really cool festival and aimed at kids, because there weren't a lot of, I know there's vegan camp out obviously, but that's kind of not really aimed entirely at kids. That's more, and I didn't necessarily want to bring my kids into what potentially might be a drug drinky environment. I was kind of thinking more of sort of family aimed festival, and just wouldn't it be cool to just create a vegan world for a weekend? So I went down that route, and I started with the festival. We started planning, we got everything going, we sold loads of tickets, everything was going fine. And this was in 2019, and suddenly my landowner said to me, "Oh, there's a problem." Who was basically being blackmailed by one of the villagers to stop the festival, and it all got completely out of hand.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and we were about 3-4 months out, so it was like full on prepared.
Jeez.
Yeah, and the landowner pulled the plug because he was literally being blackmailed by anti-vegan, which is ironic because the whole point of doing the festival was to kind of enable vegans to be in a safe space where they didn't have to put up with this anti-vegan, messages. Yeah. So it was kind of ironic in a way that was why it was cancelled. But the other good thing was the festival, the weekend it was due to go ahead in 2019, there was a weekend that had extreme winds that most festivals, actually, even the main festivals, got cancelled. I don't know if you remember, but it was in the middle of August, and our festival would have got cancelled anyway. So in a way, it was kind of like because if it had got cancelled on the weekend, it would have been a lot more catastrophic than getting cancelled 3 months out. At least we had time to sort of process refunds, and we hadn't sold all of the tickets at that point, and so it kind of was a bit of a saving grace. And then I was like quite deflated by it all, and I did a bit of meditating, thinking, "Oh, what can I do?" And I started looking for 2020 for venues, and I was just struggling. It was so difficult because I didn't want a venue that supported farming in any way, and obviously a lot of outdoor agricultural land has some kind of link to animal agriculture, and the ones that don't, then they're growing crops on their land, so you can't exactly hold a festival there.
No.
So it was becoming quite difficult. So funnily enough, I decided, okay, 2020 I'll have a break, and I'll just think about it. But thank God I did again, because that would have got cancelled, obviously, for obvious reasons. So then I put it to bed, and I started doing other things, and I actually started like offering some business advice for a bit, and I was feeling a bit lost about where I was, and obviously then lockdown happened, and I just it kept coming back to me. I just want to help vegan kids. So during lockdown, I started these like online sessions for vegan kids, and I was just doing like party. We just started with like some Christmas events, and we did crafts, and it was all on Zoom with the kids, and it started like, it was okay, this is working out quite well, this is good. And I guess that's where Vegan Kids kind of was born. It became this I want it to be kind of a site where children just come and get advice, or can meet other vegans, or whatever it might be. And we run a number of events and provide resources. I even want to get into doing a podcast at some point, and just kind of like a one-stop shop where vegan kids can come and feel like they're and also where vegan parents can come and maybe get advice, that meet other vegan parents, because I found that is equally important for vegan parents as well.
It can be quite a lonely place, can't it? Being a vegan parent, obviously, if you're in some sort of partnership with somebody, then of course that makes it slightly easier. But even then, I don't know about you, but I found at the time I didn't necessarily have a community of other vegans that I knew who were parents, and so there was a bit of okay, we're comfortable with us being vegan, but now there's so much more to navigate. It's like this whole new world opens up, I suppose, like with any parent, but there's this extra little complication of the world's telling you, even more so, the world seems to have an opinion on what you're doing. When you've got a child involved, everyone seems to have an opinion on for everything from, I remember right back in the hospital with the whole kind of formula, and think that there was a whole discussion with the hospital at the time when little one was born, and so on and so forth. So from there right through, you have these, and so this idea of creating a safe space, like you said, I love that kind of, I wanted to create a vegan world for the weekend, and now that's kind of expanded out into this kind of a bigger community. Like, was that very much kind of on your mind, particularly given the experiences that you mentioned, like with the kids and so on, and them needing that space just as much as the parents? Was it sort of almost with that in mind at the beginning, or has it kind of evolved into that through to these through the cancellations and so on?
Oh, it's very much devolved into it, I think. Yeah, I think it was just going to be the festival originally. That that would have been it. And actually, that is enough work for one person for a year anyway.
Huge, yeah, 100%.
But I like to take on massive tasks. But yeah, and it is so nice to see the kids. And when they're together, and we have obviously the online events, and we have had a few in-person meetups now since obviously we've been allowed to, and it's so nice because it's not like we kind of go in there and saying, okay, so we're all vegans, like Alcoholics Anonymous or something. they're just being kids, but they all deep down know that the others are vegans, and and actually on some of our online sessions, the kids that have been there for longer are starting to kind of open up to me, and they're starting to kind of ask questions.
Wow.
And the parents are saying to me, oh, they're more confident at school, and they're being able to, actually stand up a bit for themselves, because they're now knowing that they're not the only vegan in the world. And that was very definitely important to me. I wanted my kids to know that they weren't the odd ones out, that they weren't the ones that were strange, or it wasn't because mummy's a bit strange that she told you that all these things about, and then you've gone to school and been told, oh no, cows don't get hurt, and but don't be silly, all of this, your mummy's just a bit weird, or and all of that to happen, to them to actually see, oh no, actually there's a whole group of people that actually believe in this and are fighting for it, and we've started a young activist club as well, which is helping slightly older kids stand up for themselves and think about things that they can do to help the animals as well, and that's quite a cool club to run.
Must be amazing to have, obviously you start with the shop, and I'm going to make an impact through this, and then that kind of, then you decide to pivot, start the festival. And I'm thinking, well, that it's almost like I can see this like escalation of your sense of purpose in the world, almost like it feels like you've now like supercharged that kind of like purpose-driven mission, if you like. I don't know if it feels like that, whether I'm adding too much onto it, but it certainly from the outside looking in, it looks like that. It's
been really important to connect up my own values and it like ethical consumerism, which I guess what really got me into this was it is a journey, and because unless we go and live in a mud hut, we can't be entirely ethical. But we have to kind of pick what's important to us. And I've just kind of been stumbling my own way along that journey. And I have like a real thirst for knowledge. I just love learning stuff. And I just absorb all this information. And like, when I find out about different ethical issues, I think, okay, I'll go and research that thoroughly and see what I need to do. And obviously I can't live a completely ethical life, but I pick the bits that are important to me. I think that's what people need to do. They need to pick. Sometimes you see people, vegans even, maybe criticizing other vegans for doing X, Y, or Z. But I think the journey is yourself, and you need to take that journey yourself, and you need to find what issues. Like for me, number one issue is the animals, and that's what I feel really passionate about. And then there are other things, like I still boycott Nestle, and I try and minimize my waste. But I'm not. If it was down to like a bit of plastic or eating an animal, then I'm going to, or not eating an animal. Sorry, then I'm not going to eat the animal.
Yeah.
And I think it's that journey, and it's been so important for me to align my values with my way of work. And actually, I do actually have I homeschool my kids. I've got a full-time job, and I'm doing vegan kids. So, yeah, it's a bit crazy at the minute, but when I'm in my full-time job, one of the nice things is I drive a lot in my job, so I get to listen to podcasts all day long, which I love, which kind of does also, I learn a lot from those, so that kind of feels like I'm still doing my purpose while I'm getting paid, so that's kind of enabling me to do all these other things. And I think the dream longer term, like you've just said, you've managed to step away from the full-time job, but I'm not quite there yet, but that's definitely the dream in the future, is to really align myself so that I've kind of surrounded myself now with the right kind of people that I like, that think like me, that are on the same journey, because I've just found that when I'm not with those people, it just depresses me actually, and I just want to be happy like anyone, I guess, and following this mission and following this purpose, that's what's kind of making me feel like I have something.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely, you do. no doubt. It's an incredible mission. I'd love to get your perspective on it, 'cause there's a couple of sort of threads in there that I think I've been playing on my mind for a while, and I'd like to get your view on. So you've got the kind of you mentioned there kind of the vegans calling out other vegans and people within the community calling each other out, and that my mind straight away jumps to kind of social media culture, and it has wonderful benefits. We learn so much from each other on that space, but there also is that kind of I don't know, almost trying to like outdo each other or kind of catch each other out. I find sometimes there's a bit of like, well, you haven't, and sometimes you haven't figured that out yet, and I sometimes think, well, I haven't. You're right. I'm thank you for sharing, but I'm just trying to like figure that out as I go, kind of thing. And I'm very conscious of that. That's difficult enough, like we talked about earlier, to navigate as an adult. I'm very conscious of navigating that as a child, and obviously, like with vegan kids, a lot of the work is for the younger kids, like you say. You've got the older kids with the kind of the activism and so on. I'm just conscious of, I'd just love to get your viewpoint really on how that how we kind of best navigate that world, not as adults, but also how we best support kind of kids into this space. And I appreciate that is a big old question, but I'd love to kind of just explore it a little bit.
I think with my own kids, what I've really done is I'm quite open. I have these discussions. I mean, my daughter's 9. I have them with her, and actually we've started recording them. We did one about Halloween. We did it on YouTube, and
wow.
we just put me and her chatting about Halloween and like going out trick or treating and what are the how does she feel about it? And I'm kind of curious to learn from her, because like you say, kids are kind of actually really on it. They're actually probably more they have less influence, I suppose, that's gone into their heads. So they're kind of just sort of innocent in a way. And I'm quite interested in listening and learning from my own kids. And I think that's really important to do. I mean, she has such great ideas, and even my son, and even with things like, I'll often say to them, what do you think about this? And how, when there are those controversial issues. And I think like with the social media stuff that you were talking about, I've just really tried to surround myself with the right sort of people on. If I've been in toxic groups, if I find myself kind of getting into an argument with someone, someone once said to me, a very good thing to do is you just reply once and then that's it, because you can end up getting into these like and we've all done it, where you've had like hundreds of messages, and but actually, and since I've started doing that reply once and then quiet, it's a lot easier. And if I get into a toxic, it's just block and leave, because you can say your piece, and then I think you don't need to. I try and surround myself without toxic. I'm trying to reduce toxic people in my life, and I think it's really important. And if people aren't willing to be open, if people aren't willing to kind of listen, or then let them get on with it. I think that's just the most hopefully I always kind of think, I've had bad dealings with people in the past, and I sort of think I'm just hoping that karma is going to come around and get those people. It's not for me to plan their revenge. They've got to, hopefully they'll get that themselves. So, and
I absolutely love that viewpoint about bringing your kids into the conversation and have it like just here's the kind of various arguments. Let's talk about them. Let's out in the open. Like you say, I think kids have got a wonderful sort of sense of kind of right and wrong, and almost just see things plainly. There's no baggage of society on them. So I think that's a wonderful point. And as well as the other point, I think about sort of just removing things from your life that don't fill you with positivity. Like there's no need. Life's too short. Almost. I agree. It's kind of one of the reasons I love the podcast format over social media and things like this, is because it's not a presentation of one person's viewpoint with no retort or no. It's a kind of a in the interview format anyway. It's kind of a to and fro. It's a learning, and it's however long it is, rather than the 140 characters, which are no one can get a decent argument across in 140 characters. It's almost like it was designed to cause a bit of unrest. But
No.
yeah, I do wonder sometimes whether we give it too much. Well, I do anyway. I'll say we. Whether I give it too much power in my life, and the best way to deal with it is A, get in the real world, and B, just cut certain things out.
Yeah.
You know,
and of course kids aren't on social media, so maybe that's why we learned from them. They haven't got all of that going on. So, but I guess they have pressures at school and stuff. Obviously mine don't really have that anymore, which is kind of useful. So well, I think I'm kind of like, I'm getting to the point now where I'm surrounding myself with just vegans, and maybe that's a bad thing, because like every now and again when I do go out into like the real world, I think, oh, hang on, whoops, but it's still like not that vegan. But yeah, because everything like on my social media now is just vegan, and all my friends now are pretty much vegan, and it's just kind of like evolved to that. And it's I mean I can't stand being around like other people eating meat now, which is weird, because you know, if I think back to when I was saying about with my husband, I used to get annoyed at going to a restaurant if he couldn't have something to eat. Like I've gone complete, like if you think about that whole journey, and that's only, I mean I met my husband 13 years ago, so we're talking about over 13 years. That whole journey has completely, it's amazing, you know. And I wouldn't necessarily say I was one of those that was always like, oh, I'd never be able to be a vegan, but because I'm always quite open to changing my views with anything really. But I don't think, I mean I was a proper foodie, so and I'd like plan my meals, and I remember one person actually once said to me, how can you be vegan, like do you not like food? And I was like, no, like actually being vegan now is like I thought I'd like it would help my, like, you know, figure going vegan, but there's just so many nice products out there now. I'm like, I have to try them all. I don't know, it's just like this thing, like new product, oh my gosh. And I feel like actually now I'm exploring food and much more than I ever was before, because I'm trying new things. I'm and new products and new ways of making things, and it's like, for me, it's like, as a foodie, it's like, wow. I share that. Firstly, the bit around I thought I was going to be wonderfully slim being vegan, but then I found lots of fantastic foods to counteract that. And to be honest, I'm more than happy with that. It's fine. Again, life's too short. But I share that viewpoint around. Actually, it just opens up. If anything, it just opens up the world, I find. You know, so funny enough, somebody was asking me the other day what we gave Arthur for breakfast, and I said, "Oh, he has what we have." I was like, "Oh, what do you have?" Well, I was like, "Well, we have like porridge, and we put like chia seeds and pumpkin seeds and peanut butter and blueberries and things like that." And they were like, "Oh, okay." My kid eats Cheerios, and I was kind of like, not judging one way or the other, but I was just kind of, it just did strike me. I thought, actually, because we're so conscious of making sure that he has all of these nutritional, you know, have we got enough omega-3s? Have we done this? Have we done that? That's made us very conscious, and probably has made us eat more diversely. And then secondly, it was kind of, actually, I before going vegan, I wouldn't have done all of that either. I wouldn't have bothered, you know. I wouldn't have been of interest, particularly because it was kind of like you just did what everybody else did, and didn't give the nutrition a second thought, or also some different ingredients, like you say. So it's I absolutely share that view. I think
you
also
know,
with the kids, and I think, like, I don't know about you, but I always, whenever anything goes wrong with my kids, my first thing is, oh God, it's because they're vegan.
Yep.
Even though I know deep down it is half the time. And actually, my daughter had a condition where she had to go to hospital, and I was dreading that conversation. It was going to come up, like, obviously at one point where she's like, okay, and her diet, and I was like, yeah, she's vegan,
Yep.
and the diet. She was just actually like, okay, and she carried on, because actually the condition had nothing to do with. But you know, in my head, and then she went for blood work actually, and it all came back perfect. I was freaking out about that as well. I was thinking, oh my goodness, like the iron's going to, and it came back and it's like, everything's fine. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. I can kind of relax about that. But every time I think, and it's because it's so out there, I think that, we hear all this all the time, like you shouldn't be bringing up your vegan children, you shouldn't be, it's bad for them, and all these headline articles that when you actually look at the studies of, with very small samples, and then you look at, I just look at my kids and I think actually they look perfectly healthy. I mean, my son, who's been vegetarian from birth, I don't even think he's ever had a cold. Like,
yeah.
So, but I don't know why we have this as vegan parents, and I think it probably is just that overall that out there in the media that it's wrong to maybe somehow bring up your children as vegan when we know, and obviously now I meet a lot more vegan children and I see, and all of them are healthy, all of them are growing normally, and actually my son's very short, my daughter's very tall, and sometimes people, you can tell, they sort of look at him and they're thinking, oh, is it because he's vegan? And I'm like, but look at my daughter, she's perfectly tall.
It's so strange, isn't it? We wouldn't even think to question, even as vegans, I don't think I'd question somebody else's, child having a cold or being not very well, or having a condition or being short or whatever. I wouldn't ever think, oh, that's probably because of their diet. It wouldn't occur to me. But yet, like you, I absolutely, that's the first thing that pops into my head. Like, am I doing the right thing? Perhaps they were all right. Even though I know logically, everything I've read, I know we're probably more studied than most of the other parents that we surround ourselves with. I certainly, I think back to my own upbringing, and my parents were fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but we absolutely weren't vegan, and I was, child of the 80s, and I often say to my other half, like I don't think I ever used sunblock, like as a kid. That might just be my household, but let alone anything else. Like it was just like the door was open, and then off you go. You come back having eaten whatever you've eaten, drunk whatever you've drunk, and you come back when the sun goes down. So maybe that's an indictment on my upbringing, but certainly I just think it almost comes back to I guess social media, modern culture, all the other things. We're just so aware of everything. There's almost so much information that it kind of gets in our heads a little bit, and like you say, it again goes back to this: get out in the real world, see some other parents of vegan kids, and you're probably like, actually, or even just look at your own kids, you're like, yeah, it's pretty fine. seems fine to me, full of energy. So, why question it? Yeah,
and like you say, I mean, do non-vegan parents, I give my kids chia seeds like you, and because I've looked at all the nutrition, like even like things like seaweed and really healthy things, spirulina. All this that I put in smoothies and things, and you think probably other kids are eating like burgers and chips from McDonald's or something like that, and their diets are probably far less healthy, and I don't know why we worry so much, because actually probably our kids are probably actually really healthy.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't even know what chia seed was when I was growing up. I swear they've just been invented. It's an interesting one, absolutely. I just wanted to go back onto a subject that you were talking about a while ago, because I'm really interested in this as well. The kind of the stance we take with companies, the world in which we find ourselves with, sort of, you create your vegan bubble around you. I've done very much the same sort of thing, insofar as and I'm conscious sometimes all the media I see is something about veganism. So I often feel like I feel like everybody's talking about a certain subject, when then I go out and speak to somebody who's not in that world, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So they're not talking about it at all. And then secondly, I think you can often give yourself a false sense of progress. You can think, oh yeah, we're moving things forward because of X, Y, and Z. But sometimes the things that I see held up as progress really concern me. So I see like Nestle have got a new Kit Kat out, and I see like that being a post on certain news sites, vegan news sites, as this is the sign of like we're moving forward because Nestle have like chosen to bring out this product, or McDonald's have got a new burger, and I kind of think, is it really progress? I don't know, and I can be swayed one way and the other. I feel like it's not. That's probably my overall position, but I then have these conversations with people where they say, well, if it's not in the face of somebody who's not vegan, then how are we going to move things forward? Blah blah blah. It doesn't mean that you need to have it. All that sort of thing. Love to get your viewpoint. I'm always interested in people's perspective on this particular subject, so I'd love to get yours.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is, I think it is progress, because these companies are now, I mean, even like I said, 4 years ago, did you even hear the word vegan? Like, it's on advert. Like,
True.
I remember the first time I saw vegan mentioned on a TV advert, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. I was like, what?
Yeah.
They're talking about veganism. And the more people that bring out these bars, it can only be a good thing for veganism, I think. It doesn't mean that I have to buy it, because I still boycott Nestle, I still boycott Coca-Cola, I still boycott Mars, and I still boycott McDonald's, and that's been like a longer term thing for me than veganism. So I'm unlikely to change that. I mean, if I've kind of like had this debate recently, because McDonald's obviously just recently bought out the burger, haven't they? And I'm kind of thinking, because my kids, I think, should I have taken them to McDonald's? Because like it was always a thing for us. Like they've never been to McDonald's, and I do sort of think, are they gonna be like? But at least now, if they do decide when they're teenagers and they've got their own money to spend, at least they've got an option that they can eat. So it can only be a good thing. And the more, like, if you look at places like Tesco's now, like Tesco's would have been a place that I wouldn't have shopped in, but they've got so much vegan stuff now. I'm kind of starting to be like, oh, maybe I should start, buying and supporting this stuff. And it is so difficult, because, like I say, there is no ideal world where everything, and I think that's where you have to kind of tick off the things that are important to you. And I think the crimes that Nestle, Coke, and Mars and McDonald's have done to the world, I think they are far outweigh any vegan product that they can bring out. But that's just my personal view. I wouldn't, if a vegan wanted to eat at McDonald's, I don't have a problem with it, but I would have a problem with someone going to eat a non-vegan product. That does bother me, because that's like, for me, that's my main issue at the minute. And I think that, I know what you mean. It's difficult, and you do see these people kind of, palm oil is another one, and I actually, I have quite strong views on palm oil. I've done quite a lot of research into palm oil, because this came up a lot in my shop. And palm oil is not the problem; it's the way that it's farmed. And the Kit Kat Nestle is not the problem; it's the way that Nestle operate. If you see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's making these companies change, and whether we ever will get to the point where they start thinking more ethically, and I think they are to some extent. You do hear things, and I don't know how much of it is kind of this greenwashing a lot of the time, but maybe people are starting to wake up a bit more, and as that momentum picks up, and even just seeing the adverts on television is a good thing for some people, because at least most people probably know what veganism is now. Whereas I remember when I first was vegan, and I'd walk into a shop and I'd be like, do you by any chance have any vegan products? When I was sort of a bit scared of it all, and they'd be like, oh yeah, we've got like a cheese lasagna, and I'd be like, no, right, well, okay. I won't have anything to eat then. So it can only be a good thing that these companies are spreading the vegan message for us, and that's kind of my view, I think.
Yeah, I think when I'm on a sort of particularly optimistic view of the world, I think of it as, these companies have kind of have created their own Trojan horse for people to then go away from them. Yeah. When perhaps that's a bit abstract, but I kind of think, I have this sort of vision of, somebody picks up a Kit Kat because they can now, and they think, oh, I'll try this. That prompts them into what's the word vegan mean, etc. And maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, they're boycotting Nestle, because they're kind of like, actually, I've now looked into all this stuff, and I've figured out that that's not the way to go. So yeah, when I'm in my more optimistic modes, I feel like that. But yeah, on other occasions, I kind of think about the kind of consumerism thing. I kind of think, you know, this is them growing their overall market share, getting another piece of a different market that wasn't coming anywhere near them before. So it's not converting anyone; it's just getting some more people they weren't getting before. But then that's that's the sort of devil on my shoulder. I go one way and the other, depending on the day of the week.
But the fact that these products exist, I guess, it's potentially taking more products. Like now that there's a vegan Kit Kat and a non-vegan Kit Kat, maybe more people. I mean, maybe it's not just the vegans, and I think there's evidence to show that not just vegans buy these products. So, you know, there is that, and maybe all the Kit Kats are sold out, so they have to try the. I don't know, but in a way, I mean, like you say, like when I'm thinking more optimistically, I'm thinking, oh well, it's taking away. It's kind of. I mean, it'd be nice if it was actually replacing, because a lot of the time I think, well, okay, so Cadbury's have made that bar as well, and you think, well, if they can do that and make that taste really good, and I've tried some of these alternatives, and I can't tell the difference half the time. Maybe that's just because I'm so far down the journey now, but I sort of think if they can do that, just do it in all the products. You've obviously proved we don't need milk. Like, just take them out. Don't even call them vegan, you know.
No, you're right. I think about that with all the accidentally vegan stuff. I kind of think, well, so these companies didn't decide. There's no pitch there. They just thought, oh, well, I'll make this out of whatever ingredients is probably the cheapest to make this thing and to make it taste good. I'm thinking Oreos or whatever. Although you've got the palm oil in them and all the rest of it. But you know, like, let's just pretend that issue doesn't exist or park that for a minute. But if you take the kind of Oreo, the Oreo piece, they didn't ever set out to be creating a vegan product, but they kind of have, and so therefore kind of like everyone loves it, and they don't consider, most people who aren't vegan don't consider it whether it's vegan or not. They don't care, they just eat it. So I think there's a bit of an argument. It's a bit like going back to the nursery thing. You know, this was the conversation I had with the nursery. It's like you've got all these kids with all these different, you know, the little one over there who needs a halal meal. This child needs a kosher meal. This child's got gluten. Well, not gluten's particularly going to be solved by veganism, but you know, there's all these different requirements. Is the kind of point, and like there's one particular option that you could pick that might help a lot of those kids out, and actually they've kind of heard that. So you do wonder whether kind of companies will get to that point as well, where they think if we can take people down this road enough where they're just, you know, they're cool with it. I wonder if we could substitute it out, because there must be I wonder if there's a cost implication for them as well, whether it's actually like on scale, whether it would actually be cheaper.
Well, it must
to
be.
produce.
It must be. If you think like if you just take oat milk for an example. I mean, to grow a cow. To look after the cow, to do the whole process, and to actually keep that product fresh, as opposed to growing some oats in your garden, which actually anyone can do. You know, it can't be more expensive. Like there's no way that process, and actually all dairy. I mean, it's well documented that dairy farmers are losing money all the time. So it's like, I sometimes look at that and think, what is going on? Like, and why is oat milk more expensive? I mean, I know obviously the subsidies and stuff, but like, why? It should be a lot cheaper. Like, we should be able to get it for 20p probably. And I mean, it is coming down in price, isn't it? But
I definitely do wonder that, because it's like everything else has gone down in my food bill, but it has kind of been balanced out a little bit. Maybe I drink too much coffee with a lot of oat milk in it, but my oat milk bill is pretty phenomenal. If I think about it too much, it scares me. But I try not to.
And the vegan cheese bill is another one that's quite pricey. Like, my kids have suddenly started really liking vegan cheese now, so like I buy a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Time's getting away with this, but it'd be remiss of us not to tell everybody where to go and find you and vegan kids and learn a bit more and hopefully get involved.
Yeah, so look us up. We are vegan-kids.org on the website, and you can find us on Instagram, which is Vegan Kids UK, and on Facebook, which is just Vegan Kids. And you can also look us up on the festival website, which is vegankidsfestival.co.uk. So next year we are going ahead with the first festival, and actually we found an amazing venue. And everyone's we're all ready and set, and we've already sold about 25% of the tickets for that. So
wow.
It's looking to be it's a 3-day 2-night camping event down by Bournemouth. That's going to be really exciting, so you can look that up as well. Get in touch. We're really
super,
keen to hear from anyone who wants to kind of work with us or help kids, or any ideas for what events we can get involved in or anything like that. We're kind of I'm kind of very open to to becoming a sponge and just doing whatever it takes.
Love it. Well, we'll get all the links in the show notes, and if I don't see you before, I'll definitely see you down there next year, because Bournemouth is not a million miles away. So
amazing.
I'll be down there with the little one.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dana.
Thanks a lot.